The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. After he had fed the people, Jesus made the disciples get into a boat and precede him to the other side while he dismissed the crowds. After doing so, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. When it was evening, he was there alone. Meanwhile, the boat, already a few miles offshore, was being tossed about by the waves, for the wind was against it. During the fourth watch of the night, he came toward them walking on the sea. When the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified. "It is a ghost," they said, and they cried out in fear. At once Jesus spoke to them, "Take courage, it is I. Do not be afraid." Peter said to him in reply, "Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water." He said, "Come." Peter got out of the boat and began to walk on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw how strong the wind was, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and caught Peter and said to him, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" After they got into the boat, the wind died down. Those who were in the boat did him homage, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." The Gospel of the Lord. Again and again, we are given to know how that in the gospel passages that are read Sunday after Sunday, and this Sunday certainly is no different, how that the Lord comes to the aid of his own right on time. He's never early, he's never late, he just comes right on time. And to a group of terrorized, lonely, disciples, he comes right on time to manifest his power and his grace. I would say that a meditation, some food for thought this morning, is simply this: that the Lord is constantly revealing himself in the fabric, in every thread of our lives. Unfortunately, we are not always aware of it. We're not always aware how the Lord reveals himself to us at times because we're so caught up in the element, and the element may be a torn relationship. It could be some struggle that we're going through in life. It could be something that we called unanswered prayer, and it may be sometimes our own impatience at not seeing the work of the Lord move in the way that we think he should move and in the way that we think he should be acting. And so we throw many times our hands up in desperation, and we say, "Well, Lord, I tried my very best. I've done my part, and you did not do yours." And we lose our faith and our trust in the Lord. In the first reading from 1 Kings chapter 19, we see an individual who's been empowered by the Lord, a great prophet, the prophet Elijah. And if you read contextually what had happened before, really in the Old Testament, it seemed that the Israelites just could not keep themselves out of idolatry and wickedness, and they were constantly just turning their backs on God, so to speak. We see it today. We see it in a variety of ways. And in the first reading, we find the prophet Elijah. We're talking about a prophet, okay? He's not a rebellious individual like the prophet Jonah, who at the call of the Lord went down to Tarshish and got on a boat and just fled from the presence of the Lord. On the contrary, we find Elijah has been touched and anointed by the Holy Spirit of God. It's a beautiful thing. And yet even the prophet himself, touched by the Lord, called by the Lord, as each and every one of you are called by the Lord. Father Medina, I don't feel so called this morning. I had a struggle. I haven't had my cup of coffee, Java with Jesus, coffee with Christ. I've just not had that spiritual intimacy that I long for. Or I snapped at my husband, or the kids, they got up late. And there's so many elements that come into our play as human beings trying to find the very presence of the Lord. And we should immediately relate to Elijah. We may not be a prophet like Elijah, But certainly, come on, we have to agree, we go through our struggles, our trials and temptations of life. And the bad part, the sad part is not looking for God in the midst of it. At times we can be like Elijah. We're going to stay in the struggle without looking for the light of God, for some sense of direction. Or sometimes we attach ourselves to a thing, a place, a person that is less than desirable, less than holy, and we understand not why things in our life cannot work out for the glory of God. And many times it's because we've got our own self, will, pride, arrogance, selfishness, and self-centeredness. And perhaps there's a little bit of that present, I think, in the first reading. Elijah's thrown his hands up. God, I have done my part. And where in the world were you? Where were you when I needed you? And we do the same thing at times in our life when we feel that the presence of God has left us, when the presence of the Lord is right in front of us. And this is what Elijah found in the stillness of the night, which behooves each and every one of us at some time in the busyness of our life. I've only been here for a few days as your priest, and I tell you, this is a rockin', moving parish. And come on, folks. Give the Lord a hand clap. Don't give it to me, but it really is. But I just wonder, and as the school year begins, moms and dads, where are we finding just a little bit of time to find the presence and the quiet, sweet, tender voice of the Holy Spirit? May I lovingly encourage you that in the midst of the apostolate, your vocation in life, this isn't only directed at Father McCarthy, Father Metz, and Father Medina. This is for all of us, priests and religious, and especially you, that in the busyness of life, you better be finding some time for prayer. Well, Lord, I'm so caught up in the ministry, but you don't have time to pray. You're in trouble. All of us, beginning with the priests, we're going to be judged harder. Guess who's going to be judged even harder than Father Metz and Father McCarthy? Father Medina. I'm the shepherd. My knees are quaking. I'm serious. And you're going to find me in these years that I'm with you. I'm going to be begging you for prayers. I need your prayers. I really, really need your prayers. Well, Father, what's going on? I just need prayer. That's all. We heard about it a few weeks ago when Solomon asked the Lord, give me wisdom to know how to lead these great people that you have given me. But you know, the Lord has given each and every one of you opportunities and responsibilities, and I'm trying not to veer off the main thought, the meditation. But God has given each and every one of us special gifts and talents and callings, and it behooves each and every one of us to be caught up in a spirit of prayer, to give the Lord a little bit of time, to spend some time in quietness, in tenderness with the Lord. Elijah has left that aspect. He's so caught up in his struggle. And in the gospel from St. Matthew, same thing. We're looking at 12 gonna-be priests. These 12 apostles of Jesus, they will be at one point on Holy Thursday be consecrated priests. But they have found that in the moment of formation, they've lost sight of the goal. And this boat that they are in a stormy, rocking wind, how often did I go to the Sea of Galilee when I lived in Jerusalem? And without warning, a storm would come. And those of you that have been to the Holy Land know that when you're standing on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, without warning, a storm will just pop up. And suddenly those waves will be going from back and forth and back and forth. It gives me an idea of what the gospel today is bringing about. There's a storm on the sea, and the disciples are caught up in the middle of it. Like many times, you have been caught up in storms, and you're wondering, where is the presence of the Lord? And it really is an image, this boat with the disciples, the apostles, inside the boat, it really is an image of what the church is. That boat is the church, and those apostles is you and I, caught up in the storms of life. Father, there's no storms in life. Everything's going hunky-dory. Everything is peachy keen. You better wake up and smell the coffee. Buddy, we are in a precarious world that behooves each and every one of us, or is inviting each and every one of us to embrace the very presence of the Lord and His Word so present this morning, and go into the world and into the highways and byways and tell people about the love of Christ. Practically put, what does it mean to me this morning? Namely, that Jesus reveals Himself to us in the struggles and storms of life. And the cross that we carry Father, I'm not carrying a cross. Oh, yes, you are. Everybody has a form of cross. But how difficult and how heavy the cross becomes for you and I when we fail to connect ourselves or that cross of Christ with the power of glory, majesty, and the resurrection. Because there is always a light at the end of the tunnel. And at the point that the disciples feel that they're going under, this is where the presence of Christ comes. His mercy and his love just encapsulates each and every one of them. And Peter, he launches out. Like Elijah, he launched out in a prophetic ministry, so touched by the presence of the Lord, and yet at a moment of darkness, he wanted to throw it all out, with the bathwater. He wanted to get rid of the vision that God gave him. And so too the disciples, like you and me, go through our struggles. And yet even those of us that have launched out in the apostolate or whatever we feel that God has called us to do, even those of us who are called priests, religious, and lay faithful can feel at times that we've been forsaken by the Lord. And the danger is that in the great struggle, you lose sight of the vision. Man, don't lose sight of the vision. The vision is there. The cross is there. The power of the Lord is there. We just are not always aware of it, but it's right in our face. And when the Lord calls us, he calls us in the same manner that he called the disciples. His mercy and his forgiveness is there. We at times don't always trust that mercy and tenderness and that healing that comes from Christ. And the way that he does deliver us in the very storm, as he delivered the disciples in today's gospel. The meditation is this. There's storms going on all around us. And at times the struggle, the journey, I look back to that 500-mile walk across Spain, and you know what was on the heart of every Pellegrino, every pilgrim on that journey to Santiago de Compostela? It was this thought: do I have the capacity, do I have the strength to make it to the end? And it too is an image of life, because we are on a journey of faith. We're on a journey called by the Lord to accomplish a specific thing in this world. You are called. Don't just be looking at the priests and religious, dear friends. Don't just be looking at us up here. What does the Lord want me to do? And then after I find out what I'm supposed to do, how am I doing it before the Lord? Do I introspect? Do I make an examination of conscience, as St. Ignatius of Loyola teaches in the spiritual exercises? Do I examine my life and try to find myself and the presence of the Lord in the midst of struggle? Struggle, it's relative. We're in the world, in a world not redeemed yet by the power of the Lord, but one day it will be. And I ask you this morning, where are you finding yourself in the midst of everything? I ask you, where do you find yourself in that difficult relationship? Are you praying a little bit? Well, Father, I've thrown up my hands in prayer. I've got everything I need right in my pocket. Well, that's where you're failing. But the Lord is faithful and will manifest his grace in our lives. We simply have to trust him, and he will say, peace, be still, it's okay. And so to that struggle or storm that you're going through this morning, I say, not I, but Christ is saying to you, telling you, peace, be still, don't worry, don't fear, I'm on the throne of your life, everything is going to be okay. Everything, All Souls Catholic Church, is going to be okay. Trust a little mustard seed faith. Everything is going to be okay. Peace, be still. It is I.